NXT is the place where so many of WWE's current top superstars cut their teeth on the way to becoming true megastars of the business. From Becky Lynch, to Seth Rollins, to Charlotte Flair, to Finn Balor, to Bayley, to Kevin Owens, to... well, you get the point. Regardless of just how good they may have been before signing with WWE, so many of the current crop of top stars gained some extra seasoning in the yellow and black brand. Of course, not everybody who signs with NXT is guaranteed to become a major star in WWE. As a matter of fact, some of those who have passed through NXT have barely been heard of since. Seriously, whatever happened to Marcus Lewis? As they've dropped off the face of the wrestling landscape entirely. On the flip side of that, leaving WWE and NXT can sometimes prove to be a masterstroke that ultimately sees a talent flourish elsewhere from underneath the WWE umbrella. And it's those fledglings who flew the roost to become soaring superstars elsewhere who we're going to focus on today. I'm Adam Nicholas, and these are 10 wrestlers who failed in NXT but were successful elsewhere. Number 10, Luchasaurus. Now then, can you remember the time when NXT had a guy in a dinosaur mask running wild? No? Well, that's because that never actually happened. That's not to say that the man behind Luchasaurus didn't have a spell in WWE's developmental arm just before his rise on the independent scene. Recently signed to All Elite Wrestling, Luchasaurus has become a major favourite of many a wrestling fan, myself included, for his sheer uniqueness. After all, can you really remember any sort of even remotely similar gimmick in a mainstream wrestling promotion? I'll save you the time. The answer is no. Way before Luchasaurus was roaring through the competition, the wrestler underneath the gimmick used to go by the name of Judas Devlin, back in FCW and then in NXT. Working under the WWE umbrella for just over a year, Devlin was released by the company as they seemingly saw nothing special about the performer. Not only did Devlin get reinvented as Luchasaurus, but he also had a spell as Vibora in Lucha Underground that saw him team with Drago and Pindar to win the promotion's trio championships. Now, as mentioned, Luchasaurus is now a signed-up member of the AEW roster as Tony Khan's upstart company looks to offer wrestling fans a genuine alternative to WWE. Number 9, Tanga Loa. If it's with Bullet Club or simply the Gorillas of Destiny, we're still watching you, Tama Tonga. Tanga Loa has been tearing it up in New Japan Pro Wrestling since 2016. Now, whether the Gorillas of Destiny are the greatest tag team in the world, that's up for debate, and I'm certainly not going to give you any credit, Tama Tonga. But still, even the tandem's biggest detractors have to admit that Tanga Loa and Tama Tonga are at least in the conversation of the current best tag teams out there. Back in 2009 though, Tanga Loa began his wrestling career by signing a contract with WWE's developmental system, at that time Florida Championship Wrestling, and he'd make his main roster debut within just 2 years of that FCW deal. Initially debuting on an episode of WWE Superstars as the muscle of Hunico, Camacho was the name given to the Hawaii native. By 2013, however, Camacho was competing as a solo act in NXT. And well, the less said about that one, the better. Camacho's time in NXT fizzled out with a whimper in 2014, but following a brief spell in Impact Wrestling, this talented performer has really begun to shine since landing in New Japan in 2016. Number 8, Katrina. As Maxine, Carly Perez was a standout part of the early days of NXT. Whether as an in-ring talent, a manager, or even as a commentator, Perez felt like a star in the making who fits so much of what WWE looks for in its female superstars. Unfortunately, those NXT days didn't end well, as Carly quit WWE in 2012 due to being frustrated at how she was being used. Fast forward to 2 years later, and viewers were treated to Carly Perez turning up in Lucha Underground as the nefarious Katrina. The unique and magical corner of the wrestling business known as Lucha Underground positioned Katrina as a big-time player who was the manipulative, evil manager of Lucha Underground's most dominant heel, Mil Muertes. Now, with the future of Lucha Underground still uncertain as the TV show looks increasingly unlikely to be given another season, maybe just sort the contract situation thing out, that might be a good start. One of the biggest shames is that Katrina isn't on TV right now. Either way, Carly Perez has taken her stardom to a whole new level since departing NXT 7 years ago. Number 7, Ivelisse. Much like the aforementioned Carly Perez, Ivelisse Velez is somebody who found great success in Lucha Underground after departing WWE and NXT. In addition to being 1/3 of Lucha Underground's first ever Trios champions, Ivelisse similarly impressed in Shimmer and in multiple stints with Impact Wrestling. Before being recognised as one of the best female wrestlers in the business, Ivelisse came onto WWE's radar back in 2011. It was back then that Ivelisse took part in WWE's Tough Enough before signing a developmental deal later that year. From Florida Championship Championship Wrestling to the infancy of NXT, Ivelisse continued to hone her craft before WWE decided to release her from her contract. Ivelisse seems to be one of those wrestlers whose career is in limbo right now due to the ongoing contract dispute between Lucha Underground and several of their performers. Still, her future looks like it might see her return to WWE, with the talented grappler attending a WWE tryout just this past April. Now, whether anything comes of that at all, we'll have to wait and see, but it seems likely that we're waiting to hear about the contract situation in Lucha Underground. Number 6, Bram. Now, the story of Tom Latimer is one that could have been oh so different. If you remember, Latimer looked like becoming a huge WWE star as Kenneth Cameron of The Ascension. Now, before they became the sham tag team that they are now, after having become a really good tag team in NXT, The Ascension was a fascinating pairing of Kenneth Cameron and Connor O'Brien that had an almost vampire-like edge to them. With The Ascension one of the hottest acts in NXT, the wheels well and truly came off when Latimer was charged with drunkenly assaulting a police officer. Yep, that'll do it. While The Ascension were repackaged and eventually became a laughingstock on the main roster, and god damn it, think of how good they were in NXT, Latimer would eventually end up landing in Impact Wrestling as Bram. From 2014 to 2017, Bram was one of Impact's most intriguing acts. Whether as a heel or babyface, the Britain's look and rough in-ring style made him constantly come across like a true badass. Currently working on the independent scene, Bram is still only 32 years of age and so has a lot of wrestling left in the tank. Even though he was great at what he did during his run in NXT, the manner in which Tom Latimer exited WWE will class his time there as being a bit of a failure. Luckily though, Latimer would go on to find success elsewhere as he embraced the King of Hardcore nickname given to him in Impact Wrestling. Number 5, Austin Aries. Now, he may have referred to himself as the greatest man that ever lived during his time in NXT, but that was sadly not the moniker you should have realistically placed on Austin Aries during his time on the Yellow and Black brand. Throughout various spells in both Ring of Honor and Impact Wrestling, A-Double was absolutely fantastic, with his cocky attitude and intense in-ring style making him a bona fide star who was viewed as one of the best in the business. And then came an ill-fated jump to WWE. Signing up to be part of the NXT brand in 2016, Aries' run was a major disappointment, and in fairness, not all of that was down to the former TNA champion either. It was only mere months into his NXT career that Aries was put on the shelf thanks to a broken orbital socket suffered in a match against Shinsuke Nakamura. Aries would take up a spot on the 205 Live commentary table, a role he was fantastic in, and his return to action would culminate with a WrestleMania 33 match against Neville. But having failed to really make the impact he wanted to, A-Double requested and received his WWE release only 3 months after WrestleMania. During his NXT days, many fans had pegged Austin Aries as a prime candidate to become the NXT champion. Sadly, it wasn't meant to be, and the greatest man that ever lived would return to Impact Wrestling before more recently competing for MLW. Number 4, Eli Drake. Every now and again, those in the wrestling business talk about the magical it factor that a truly special talent has to have if they're going to connect to a mass audience. And one person who has that special something is Eli Drake. A fantastic talker and a good in-ring hand, Drake became one of the very few bright lights of some absolutely dire years in TNA and Impact Wrestling upon arriving in the company in 2015. Where his time in NXT is concerned, Drake actually had a couple of stints with WWE. The most notable of these spells came in 2013, with the real-life Shawn Ricker heading to Florida to begin training under the NXT brand. The charismatic Ricker would only have a total of 13 matches in NXT before being released from his WWE contract just 8 months later in August 2014. In a move that could see things coming full circle, WWE have recently reported interest in signing Eli Drake over the past couple of years, and even more so now that Drake is a free agent after leaving Impact Wrestling earlier this year. Number 3, Sami Callihan. In recent years, Sami Callihan has proudly referred to himself as the Draw, as he's continued to cause quite the buzz throughout the wrestling industry. But even before his time under the WWE umbrella, Callihan had amassed an impressive reputation for himself with stints in promotions such as CZW, Ring of Honor, Dragon Gate, and Pro Wrestling Guerrilla. Upon signing with WWE and NXT back in 2013, he was rejigged as a computer hacker called Solomon Crow. Whether the gimmick could have ever really worked, nobody knows for sure, because to be honest, Crow ended up being used so sporadically and without any real intent despite the super brief rivalry with Kalisto. Since asking for and receiving his WWE release in 2015, Sami Callihan has made himself one of the most sought after talents on the independent scene. More recently, 2019 saw Sami as a main player in both Major League Wrestling and Impact Wrestling, although that MLW relationship seems to have soured a little after Callihan went off script and caused excessive damage during a Force Count Anywhere match against Mance Warner. Number 2, Juice Robinson. CJ Parker was a fun and entertaining character in NXT, yet there was always that undeniable feeling that it felt like the character had a bit of a shelf life, which was highlighted very quickly by CJP becoming a jobber to the Stars. Having been signed to WWE since 2011, Joe Robinson would leave the company and his CJ Parker name behind in 2015. And thus, Juice Robinson would soon be born, and he hasn't looked back since. After wrestling for CZW, CMLL, and Ring of Honor, Robinson made the ballsy move to take a chance in Japan and become one of New Japan's famed young boys. Working his way up through the ranks, Juice Robinson is now one of the most must-watch characters in New Japan Pro Wrestling, and is delivering some of the best promos not just in New Japan, but in the wrestling business in general. As NJPW continues to look at expanding its appeal to a wider audience, particularly in America, Juice has been a key figure on New Japan programming and has held the prestigious IWGP United States Championship on 2 occasions already. On more than one occasion, Juice has stated just how much he's loving life in Japan and has no plans to make a permanent return to North America anytime soon. He's a shining example of what can be achieved when you take a chance on yourself away from WWE. And number 1, Tessa Blanchard. Right now, Tessa Blanchard is one of the hottest names in the wrestling business and a former WCPW alumni, I should point out. So much so, the Queen of the Carolinas recently headlined Impact Slammiversary pay-per-view in an intergender match against Sami Callihan. Blanchard has such a swagger and legitimacy to her wrestling persona and in-ring work, and at only 23 years of age, the future for Tessa Blanchard is a bright one. Now, she may have landed on the radar of long-time wrestling fans due to being the daughter of legendary Four Horsemen stalwart Tully Blanchard, but she's already crafted a reputation completely off her own back as being a standout performer. But when it comes to NXT, Tessa had a run with WWE's developmental brand back in 2016 ahead of competing in the 2017 Mae Young Classic. Unfortunately, her first round Mae Young Classic bout saw her going up against eventual winner Kairi Sane. Blanchard was eliminated from the tournament in her first match, and her stint in NXT had a tendency to be jobber to the stars. Looking back at it now, WWE must be absolutely kicking themselves at not being able to tie Tessa down for a prolonged run in NXT. Blanchard herself has said she needed the time away and wasn't ready for WWE back then, but right now, she's thriving in Impact Wrestling, and she's one of the biggest names not just in women's wrestling, but in the wrestling world as a whole.